Hello, can you all hear me? Hello, hello, hello. Just put in the chat, say yes if you can hear me, and then I'll get going. Should be all good. Yes, yes, no, yes. Hello? Anything? Yeah, we can hear me. Cool. So, hello and welcome everyone to part 6 now of this series. Most of you are probably up to date, hopefully, with what we've covered so far. So, essentially, what we did last time was the brows and the eye pass on this acting shot, and now we're going to do lip sync. And there's a couple of things I quickly wanted to cover before we go into the actual shot. So, without further ado, we'll get straight into it, so we're not wasting too much time. There's a lot of different ways people approach lip sync, and there's no right or wrong way per se. There's a technically correct way, but there's artistic and creative licenses that you can use to get a certain style that you think works better for the project you're working on. Now, technically, there's proven ways that mouth and sound works, but there's, as I say, there's certain ways that different studios will use this and manipulate this to get the outcome thereafter. And a prime example of where they slightly alter these things would be Disney. Now, it's quite known upon the industry that Disney prefer to favour shape more than they do 100% accurate. And the reason they do that is because they think it's easier to read and it's more appealing, and you can still read, you still believe that they're saying it, even though they're not articulating every sound correctly, how a mouth would actually work. So I just wanted to go through a couple of scenes and compare that to something else, to another studio where they may use it slightly differently before we go into the shot, just so you can see how I'm going to approach it and how I'm going to try and do a hybrid of the two. So basically Disney favors shape. So I'm just going to quickly play this, and we'll go frame by frame, and you can scrub and hear the sound.
This water sanitary? It looks questionable to me.
It's fine, honey.
Ugh. But what about bacteria?
So that's just an example where they're kind of favouring shapes, and they will articulate certain shapes if they can articulate certain things with the tongue or the lips in a certain way that doesn't diminish the shape that they're trying to achieve, then they'll add it in. But if there's an articulation that would take away from the shape that they're trying to make, then they don't use it. So now you can see that they already, because it's in 2D and they go every other frame, they're also hitting the beat slightly earlier, so that's something to keep in mind because it's 2D. So actually they'll hit the sounds 2 frames earlier than you usually would. But when we're in 3D, Disney and places like McGuff, their general rule of thumb would be to hit the sounds 2 frames before, and that gives it time to read. Now, technically, sound happens on the modulation, so you'd hear it as it moves. But to make it read and to anticipate the sound, Disney would go 2 frames before. So in here, they're going 4 frames before because it's 2D. So I want you to be aware of that. So you can see that was 4 frames before on water. Sanitary.
It looks questionable to me.
So I'm just looking here. Sorry if it's crackling the sound.
It's fine, honey.
So it's around here where he says bacteria.
But what about bacteria?
So all of this is actually pretty good considering. bacteria. So on here, on teria, you would open the mouth and then the tongue would flick down after. So you do this to anticipate, and then you go, and then the actual sound of the t comes from the tongue, not the mouth. So the mouth would open earlier. So, sorry, the mouth would open on the sound, usually, and then the tongue would come down with that, so it'd be slightly offset. But on here, you can see here, there's no tongue articulation. They curled it slightly, but it's not really on the roof. So you don't really read the t so much. You just see that, you see it with the mouth, but not the tongue. So that's where they're choosing. That's where they're choosing to do it. They're not favouring the articulation, they're favouring the shape, so that you read it.
Tantor, can't you see Mummy's talking?
Again, they're talking. So on talking, you would favour your tongue to the roof of your mouth, so that you can articulate the k. You can't go k without your tongue. You see mummies. Again, mummies talking. There. See, they didn't want to articulate the k, and they favoured the shape. They just eased into one shape and then came out of it. So that's just a couple of examples of how they use it. Try and find another bit. So this is in Mulan. Let's see another example we can find. I think I saw one earlier around here.
Come on. Who did a good job? Come on, tell me who did a good job.
Oh, all right. You can be a guardian again.
There you go, you can be a guardian again. Right. So, alright. You can... So we don't see the k. You see that?
You can be a guardian.
He just favours in.
You can be a guardian.
You don't even see the mouth close. You can... See that? How they're just favouring the shape? They don't even read the b, which is quite bad. You can be a guardian again. Now, this might have been a design choice, but again, they're not doing what's technically correct.
Again.
It's a pretty fun motion. Okay, now I wanted to compare that with, say, DreamWorks, and I wanted to keep it still a fair comparison by keeping it human and also keeping it 2D. I didn't want to, because I know DreamWorks are primarily 3D these days, as is Disney, to be honest, but you know what I mean. I wanted to keep it all in the same medium so that there's no, oh, but that was 3D, this was 2D.
Piece by piece.
So, if we have a look here...
Disgusting.
They're beyond disgusting.
Yeah, way beyond.
Then we're in agreement. I'll begin the necessary preparations immediately. Now, do you wish to have your victims bound to an altar? Or would you prefer them free range?
So I'm just looking at the... free range. You can see there how the tongue is rolling. And there's this like subtle like compressions in the lips.
And will you be devouring their essence whole or piece by piece?
So even this kind of movement, this kind of transition, where you see the compression in, I can't even remember what you call these now. There's a technical name for this shape here. But you can see how they're all very subtly changing shapes. And there's a little more like squash and stretch and subtle like polish that you don't see as often in Disney.
Zach, you've lost me.
My lord.
You've lost. See there? See how the tongue rolls off? Me. but they're still kind of favouring the shapes as much as they can.
Zach, you've lost me.
My lord, these people will not respect you if...
These people will not. Can you also notice that they're not going 4 frames before like Disney? They're actually going 2 frames before. Not fear you. So they still try their best to favour shapes so that they're not overcomplicating things, but there is a lot more like subtle articulation that they're trying to use.
These people will not respect you if they do not fear you.
Now, this is something that's quite important because it comes down to your choice whether you want to favour shape or articulation, and if you can get both, that's probably like the sweet spot. And how many frames before you go is also by style choice, whether you want to anticipate earlier or if you want to hit it technically accurate. Now, I've been trained more on the DreamWorks side of things, having my training through lip sync, which is very very strict. Has been with Sean Sexton, who's a supervising animator up at DreamWorks, and he's very for being 100% accurate. So he wants to see all the subtle articulations, especially even more now in 3D. He wants to hear it on the sound. He wants to have it very very pronounced and 100% true. And this is something that they push for now at DreamWorks. Whereas if you look at Disney, it's still in 3D. They'll still try and hit those subtle articulations, but they'll favour the shape as much as they can because they consider appeal. They favour appeal slightly more than they will what's correct. These are all generalizations, and it will still be project dependent, I'm sure. And whether it's a human or an animal, etc. There's so many different ways. There's no like big, large generalization you can really make, but for the sake of just trying to favour an argument, this is what I've compared. Now, I'll just quickly bring this up. I just wanted to also show how the jaw technically works. Now, I've covered this slightly before in another class, another stream, but I just wanted to cover this as we're going to do it again today, and you actually can see me do it now. So, just look at the jaw and the tongue. Those are the 2 main things to look out for. So these are X-ray scans of someone actually talking. It's not in English, I think it's in German. But you still get the idea. I'll go in a second.
Meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren.
Even there, can you see the point I want to make from this is see how the jaw actually comes back. Now, we're usually taught how that a lot of people only lip sync the jaw to go in one axis on the Z. Usually it's the Z axis if it's rigged correctly. It'd be on the Z axis. Now, when I do this, I'm rotating from the Y, which you are able to do, but it would only be on like if you really want to grit your teeth or something like this, or you really want to like push a pose, I guess. You can do this. This is going for what's anatomically correct. Just to mention, you can't translate in the X, but you can translate back because the jaw has the ability to do this. You see my jaw now? I'm pushing that forward because it's almost like a shoulder blade. I don't know the full anatomy of it, but it has the ability to do this. And that's something you can consider when you're doing your lip sync, depending again on your style and what you want to do. I like to try and implement some of this so that it feels more believable, but I will also try to favour shape.
Dies ist kein Röntgentonfilm, sondern eine Aufnahme.
Can you see how much the tongue is sticking to the top of the roof of the mouth?
Mit der Magnetresonanztomographie.
And see how much it goes. Here you go. Now it bends to the back. It touches the back, and then like flat on the top, and then it will go to the tip. and then so you can see how much the tongue is used, and it's very disregarded a lot of the time when people animate. Another version here. Quickly bring that up. The exact same thing. You can see how the jaw will move in different. It will also push back.
Het. Heck.
I just wanted to show that to you guys so that we're aware of this when we do this now. So what I'm going to be trying to aim for is, my goal with this for the lip sync for this piece is I'm going to be trying to favor shapes whilst trying to get some subtle articulations that I've learnt with DreamWorks, and also in terms of sync, whether it's going to be on the sound or before the sound. This is more of an experiment. Now, I've been taught to do it on the sound, but then I like the idea of anticipating the sound so that you read it. Now, I'm used to, before I started doing training with DreamWorks, I would always go 2 frames before because I thought that was what was correct. But I've never tried going in between, which would be 1 frame before. So for this piece, I'm going to experiment and I'm going to try and do it 1 frame before. Now, as for my workflow, since I work on 2s and just to get the sync correctly, I'm going to work on the sound, and then later I'm just going to offset it by 1 frame earlier. And then hopefully I'll get my 1 frame earlier anticipation. But for now, that's what I'm going to do. So that's my approach for this piece. And just to show you what progress I've made since the last session, I've splined. I've literally hit spline and everything, and I just did a couple of cleanup passes, like I mentioned I would do at the end of the session, where I just wanted some of the brow stuff was working a bit too over the top, and I just wanted to make it so it wasn't too distracting. So this is what I've come up with.
Yeah, they told me and I didn't tell you, and I thought they'd cancel because they normally do, and they didn't. Yeah, they told me and I didn't tell you, and I thought they'd cancel because they normally do, and they didn't.
Now I haven't actually touched any of the body or any of the hands since we last did our cleanup session in part 5. I literally just hit spline. So you can see it's pretty clean. It should be, because I went through every single one of my curves to make sure it was nice.
Yeah, they told me and I didn't tell you, and I thought they'd cancel because they normally do, and they didn't.
Yeah, so I'm pretty happy with where it's going so far. Now we just need to do lip sync. So we're going to focus around this area today. Please ask questions if you're confused by anything, or if there's things that you want to know or you don't understand, just pop them in the chat. So just going to go through. So I've got all my main shapes. So as you saw, at the moment we've got our main shapes that I want to hit for the emotion, and then I'm going to start articulating the actual beats and rhythms inside of that now. So in here, she still has her mouth closed for ya, so we're just going to add a little bit of tension. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm just going to add a subtle. I'm going to be nudging a lot this session as well, just so you know. Which I just hold. I hold Alt and then use the arrow keys just to nudge in space. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to add a little bit of tension there. So I'm starting to articulate some like muscles going on. And then so yeah. And this is where we want to punch on yeah. Now I want to be making sure that I'm still hitting some nice shapes. And I'm trying to use as little controls as I can to achieve that. So I'm using the main control here on the lips, and I can rotate that to bring out some asymmetry in the pose. Yeah. And we can favor this shape already. Yeah. Yeah. So So in there she says they. So now I'm just going to grab all the lips, make sure I'm favouring back from that pose, and then to go to anticipate they, we need to bring the tongue forward. So I'm making sure I get the tongue in my picker. So let's get perspective. I'm going to push the tongue forward, down, and bring the rest up to bring it forward. So it's going to touch the top of the. Oh, it's going to touch the top of the teeth. Now you can see technically in space, it would we wouldn't really see too much. So I'm just going to favour the silhouette so that we read the tongue. And I can already favour that shape so that the tongue is already lifting up. Yeah, the. So I do a lot of this. I'll do just by like actually making the sounds my shape, the shape myself, and then feeling what's happening to my mouth. So you'll probably see me doing a lot of mouth shapes today. Yeah, the. I'm also considering each time. I'm also considering the next main shape. So the shape that we're going to hold on is going to be where the corners of the corners of the mouth should be favouring to, and it can still have subtle ups and downs and in and outs between that, but overall should be favouring to one shape, because that's going to be our main shape, like Disney would. That's going to be our main appealing shape, and then inside of that we can add subtle articulations, which we get from DreamWorks. Again, this is all generalizing, but that's what I'm just going to use today to make it easier for you guys to understand. So each time I do this, I'm going to make sure that I'm favouring from the shape I made. So that's our new shape, and now favoured from that between they. So now the tongue is coming back, so I can literally just scale to default using A tools, super useful. But it actually starts to touch the back of the mouth. Yeah, so I want to pronounce the tongue here. Save this. Probably should save it as a new version. So you can see that we're widening the corners now for they. So we don't need to open the mouth too much for this. It's mainly in the corners for they. I feel like I could probably push the. So I'm going to curl it under. They told me. So they told me. So they told. When I say that now, I'm articulating the t with my tongue, so I'm not saying they told. They told. I'm just saying, when I say it, yeah, they told. They told. So told. So T and O are kind of blended together. So I'm anticipating the t with t. So they told. So I'm already going to be favouring my corners into O, but the T is going to anticipate to the roof, and then we articulate the sound on the down of the jaw. And then the tongue follows through. They, and again, the roof, the tongue comes to the roof, so we don't see it. They, and now the corners are going to come in. We're easing out. They, and we can also grab these corners and we can start to pinch them slightly. So now we've got the old, told. Told. Gonna make sure I get some nice shapes as I do this. So I'm still favouring one side slightly. They told. I could probably bring these up slightly. Oh, there's a weird thing with Bonnie's picker. It's that control. They've reversed one of the controls in the pick and it's really annoying. They told. So I'm just grabbing all of these and pushing it forward. They told. All. So now this is coming down, but the tongue is coming down, but the end of the tongue is actually going to roll off the roof. Toll for the L. They told. Now, another thing to consider that you can consider if you really want to go for higher quality is also consider the accent and how they pronounce certain things. Now, for example, I know some feature films will actually require you to re-lip sync the movie in a different language, depending on, obviously, budgets, etc. Whatever's requested for the requirement of that movie. And I know that there was a couple of DreamWorks movies where they were actually going to consider re-lip syncing in Mandarin. And the issue with this would be they actually need to have someone come in and teach you how they articulate things with their mouth in Mandarin to pronounce certain words, because we pronounce words differently. And it's the same way I myself can't roll my R's, whereas a lot of people in Europe can when you think of Italians or Spanish. And there are certain places in England where you can't roll your R's. And I can't even demonstrate what I'm trying to say to you because I can't do it. But it's an actual thing. So in here, when she says told me, she doesn't pronounce the D that much. She says they told me. You hear that? You don't hear the D. It says they told me. So on they told me. So in here, I'm not going to close the jaw completely. I'm just going to favour into it slightly. And let the M, they told. And I'm going to let the lips favour into toll. Toll. trying to think of this now. Sorry. The lips are going to go into the M sound, but the tongue is still going to be rolling out of toll. Toll. And then the lips are going to come down so that they seem together for me as they compress. They toll. And I'm going to already be favouring even more into this shape for the closed lips, because we need to, and we ideally need to stick the M sound for 2 frames in order to read that, to read the compression before we hit on the me. So since we don't have a lot of frames to favour into this shape, we actually need to take some out of what we would eat out of toll, and we need to already be favouring into me. Now in here, I need to start making my shapes a little cleaner. I still want to give some nice appeal to this. I think I've gone a bit too far in some areas. If you have questions, guys, please do ask. We're very quiet today. They told... Come on. Me. I feel like this is compressing down too much, so I'm just going to lift it up a bit. Told me. Now I'm going to blend out of this one. Me. Me. I'm going to take some pinch out. See that already? And obviously this is like a first pass on this as well, so I have to go through and make sure I hit everything correctly. And they told me, I'm already going to be anticipating the n, where the tongue needs to touch the roof of the top of the mouth, the roof of the mouth. So now I'm favouring into my main key pose. I told me, and I and I they told me, and I didn't. So on I didn't need to, please. computer. Thank you. I didn't. I didn't. So I want to. On didn't, I want to have that tension on the lips, and I didn't. Now, I am actually aware that some of these shapes I'm not very happy with. They're a little unappealing in certain ways, so I'll probably end up having to go through and doing a pass on them. But just to get the sync for now, these are the main bits I need to hit, and then I can go in later and I can clean up and make some of this a little nicer to look at. Didn't tell. So I'm thinking about the tongue. Didn't. Didn't. So you can, when she says tell, there's like an exhale. Didn't. And I didn't. So on didn't, I also want to bring the mouth back, the jaw back a bit. They told. On toll, we're going to bring the jaw forward. Toll. Also, I feel like toll is a smaller shape, so I'm going to try my best to try and shrink this. See what I can come up with. Just pinch some of these corners in. And again, there's a bit of some shapes in here that just need simplifying. It doesn't help that I'm also using a low poly version, but it's fine. Tell. So there's like, when she says tell, hell. So she almost like, she breathes out, she says tell. So I want to try and get that in there. So she would actually bring her jaw forward slightly. Hell. Didn't tell. And I didn't tell. Tell. See if I can curl that out slightly. Hell. I want to get the little sounds that we mentioned. So we're going to hold on this. And then we can roll the tongue off now. but we're still going to be favouring into you as it goes through that shape. You, didn't tell you, so you. I'm thinking about the jaw and how that's working as I say that with my lips. You. So I'm going to curl the lips under. You. Is there anything you guys don't understand? So I'm just changing the timing a bit on the jaw. So he just wants it to accent on you and then come back. W. So she starts to relax here on W. You. She'll pinch less. These will probably come back to default a little. Guys are very quiet today. I guess it's just watching. If there's anything, it doesn't have to be about lip sync, guys. If there's anything even about the face or the body or anything, I might be able to help you out. Anything that you're struggling with your own stuff. Ooh. So before we start to relax, I also want to add a bit more of an O, like a compression. Wend, wend, you wend, you wend. Oh, and she doesn't pronounce d, you and she just goes you and you and. So we can add a little overshoot and you. But we do still need to work on the tongue. You. Didn't tell me. I'm not feeling the ya that we need before you, so I just need to go in here and make sure that we get a bit more of the ya. You, like that, not like that. So in here I need to favour into this bit now. So we got a couple of questions. which is good. Thanks, guys. Do you prefer to lip sync this way, or do you tend to do it in stages? First jaw, then lips. I tend to try my best to do it all at once, but that's probably not the best workflow. Some people will do passes, so they'll do a jaw first, and then they use that to then they'll do the corners, etc., etc. There's definitely some benefits to doing it that way. The only issue I have with that is I'm not crafting shapes so much, and I do want to also be thinking about the shapes a little more. So I can actually craft a shape as I'm doing this. Whereas I'd have to go back in and do a pass on like shape for appeal reasons. So I think maybe I also need to figure out a stronger workflow, but this is at the moment. I try different things. This is how I'm doing it for now. Usually I'd keep it in blocking before I do all of this, because at the moment it's in spline. But it's actually good to see how it transitions anyway. Someone said to me, you should not show the back side of the teeth. Will you correct the teeth too? When you say the back side of the teeth, do you mean this? In here? This white section? Is that what you mean by back side of the teeth?
They told me and I didn't tell you.
I mean, the way you could correct that is by tucking this shape in. It's quite hard to achieve these things, but usually when lighting comes in, you don't even notice the shape at the back. But there are ways that you can try to avoid that. But at the same time, it depends. It honestly depends on the model at the same time. I don't think you would notice it in this case, but you can, for example, try to like tuck like parts in, and that might help. Like, there's different ways you can like avoid that, but I would avoid. There's no rule. There isn't like you cannot like move the teeth if you need to, but I would avoid it if you can, because you tend to notice it when you go to splining. You'll notice the teeth sliding.
I didn't tell you.
What I'll probably end up doing is once I've done the sync on this, I'll go through and I'll draw over shapes that I want to hit for more appealing reasons, and I'll study different mouse shapes that people have done in the past, and then I'll try and use that, and I've already got my sync in there, like my lip sync is in there. All I have to do is tweak those to get nicer shapes.
I didn't tell you and
Now I want to start favouring one side a bit more. Just thinking of... I will try my best to think of shapes as I'm going along, but it's not 100% my priority when I'm trying to do this pass. It's more just to actually get the sync working. And then I go back, if I need to, and do... Essentially, yeah, as I say, I'll do a draw over. Some pretty ugly bits going on. See if I can get that to pinch a bit more. Just making sure it transitions. So when she breathes in, my jaw comes back slightly as well. And I'm going to hold this for a beat longer. And then her tongue comes back. This will probably comes back to normal a bit more. So we get a nicer shape in the tongue. I So she goes, so we need to hit the back of the tongue. And then she goes into thought, I think. Yeah. I thought. But when she says I want most of that to come from the tongue. I don't need to close the mouth completely in order to do that. But we do want to have some texture in there. So I'm just going to bring the tongue forward. So she says thought. So thought. They'd. And again, they'd. So on the d, they'd. So be on the tongue. Cancel. So when she says cancel, they would probably bring their jaw back slightly. Because when they say can, slightly more American, cancelled. We don't say ca, they say can. I'm not trying to offend anyone here. You hear it though. Cancel. I'm going to bring in this earlier. the breathing, the breath here. Just going to roll tongue. That's where I wanted it. Sorry, that was too early. Can. Can. So that's where the tongue come up. As the mouth begins to close, can, and it goes into soul. Can, soul, cause, cause. I'm just going to push some of these shapes a little more. Sorry, I know people are asking questions. I just need to get these shapes right. They. Okay. I'm working on my bachelor short film for university at the moment. I can't decide how I want to animate my character. He is a robot. I don't know if I want him to move more realistic or cartoony. Do you have any tips? I guess it depends on the rest of your piece and kind of what kind of message you're trying to give. If you want it to, is the rest, it's got to sit in the same world as everything else. Everything has to be designed together. So if you want it to come across more like, I guess you could say cartoony usually tends to lend itself more to humor because you have the ability to exaggerate things. So if there's going to be more humor driven, then you could push the cartoonia further. Whereas if you want to go for more like a heartfelt, like more sincere sort of piece, then you could push it slightly less and go more towards slightly more realistic. So for example, the Iron Giant is somewhere between, I would say, where it's like it still has cartoony elements to it, where it has the ability to push and go a little more like the timing and everything. You can still exaggerate, but it's not fully cartoony. It doesn't have smears in it. I don't think there are any smears in Iron Giant, not that I can see, not that I've studied. But the timing, it still has that snappiness if it needs to, and they still can exaggerate face expressions. But at the same time, it's also a very sincere and quite sad film. And so they have the ability with that style and that design to also go slightly more subtle and more sincere. So I think you've got to decide what kind of message you're trying to tell everyone, and that kind of the style and how far you push it can lend itself more towards the story, because everything's in favor of story at the end of the day. I think that's probably the best advice I could give for that. So if you're going for more humor, maybe you could push it a bit more. For example, there's not really much like sincerity in, say, like Hotel Transylvania. It's more about humor and entertainment, and so they really push it and they go completely crazy. But it does have the ability to go more subtle if it wants to, but it doesn't tend to lend, the designs and the style of the show isn't lent towards more like subtle, genuine, like heartfelt emotion. It's more to do with like being playful and fun. So it lends itself that way. I think that helps. It's a hard question. Usually you have a style in mind when you have an idea for a pitch. You tend to have a vision where you kind of see what direction you want to take it. But I understand that it can be difficult. So for normally doing we didn't, I'll do later. But I think hopefully it's not going to be perfect by any means. It's only we only have an hour to do this, but it should be going in the right direction. There's probably going to be some things that really aren't working, so I'm going to make that disclaimer now. But we'll see what we get. In theory, things should be along the right lines. And just so that we don't get any weird, because I'm only focusing on the keyframes and not the in-betweens, so some of the beats are going to be off anyway. So just to help with that, I'm going to hit it back into stepped. So it's not going to be splines now. And hopefully it will just make the shapes that we have sculpted a little better. But the beats aren't going to be completely on point. And do keep in mind that I'm also going to offset this. So it's going to be offset by a frame or two later, so that we can anticipate and read those sounds a bit earlier. So, it's a work in progress, in other words. So don't get too caught up thinking, oh my god, this is the final thing, this looks terrible. But it's just to show you guys my workflow and my thought process. That's the main thing I want you to take away from this. I'll let that play blast. Whilst I've got this second, for anyone who's in the UK, they currently at the moment is BFX Festival in Bournemouth. I believe even AnimDojo might even be there to represent themselves, I'm not sure. I know Bluesy will be there, so I'm sure they'll be promoting AnimDojo at the same time. And I'll be going there tomorrow and the day after, so Thursday, Friday, I'm going to be at BFX, so if you happen to be in the country and going to the festival, I might see you there. Okay, so this is what we got.
Yeah, they told me and I didn't tell you, and I thought they'd cancel because they normally do, and they didn't.
Yeah,
they told me and I didn't tell you, and I
it's
thought
getting
they'd
along.
cancel 'cause they normally do, and they didn't.
It's in the right direction. There's definitely some shapes in there that need working, so it's more appealing. There's also some more like things to do with the sync where it's not working yet.
Yeah, they told me and I didn't tell you, and
especially I didn't tell you. I need to rework. I might end up recording myself saying it and trying to do a bit of an impression of how she says it so that it's more accurate. It won't come across as natural, but I'll try. And hopefully that will help with just the sync and how that beat works, because I'm telling you, and there's quite a lot going on there. So yeah, I think that's going to help.
Yeah, they told me and I didn't tell you, and I thought they'd cancel because they normally do, and they didn't.
Also, I thought they'd cancel isn't working either.
Yeah, they told me and I...
But yeah, they told me is working fairly well.
Yeah, they told me and I didn't tell you, and I thought they'd cancel because they normally...
I thought they'd cancel. So on cancel, I feel like we need to add the k with the teeth to make that read.
Tell you, and I thought they'd cancel because...
Yeah. Unfortunately, I can't scrub in this, can I? No, I can't audio scrub. It's really annoying.
I thought they'd cancel because they normally do, and they didn't.
Yeah, we just need the k, the anticipation of k.
I thought they'd cancel...
Because the tongue isn't justifying that right now.
I thought they'd cancel because they normally do, and they didn't.
But yeah, I think hopefully that gives you a little insight into how I approach lip sync. Again, this is only one approach. You're going to hear many different ways, and there's no correct way. you've got to do what you think is right for your piece or whoever's piece you're working on, because a lot of the time we do it for someone else. Most of the time we do it for someone else. So I think that's a good thing to keep in mind, and you've got to consider how realistic it is and what kind of art direction they've got in mind for the whole piece, and that will help you to decide how you approach lip sync, whether you're favoring shapes or you're going for more like articulation. Yeah, hopefully that helps. I think the main thing I would say is overall keep it appealing and make sure that each thing reads enough that you understand, you believe that they're saying it. That's the main goals with lip sync overall. You don't want it to look ugly, and you want to make it, and you don't want it to look like they're not saying it. So that sounds pretty obvious, but I think those are the main two tips that you can use no matter what style you're in. And then the other bits that are more minute details, that's more how you approach it and the general execution. Yeah, I hope that helps you guys. And then I'll see you. I'll try and get a further pass in lip sync on this for the next session, and then we're going to go more into polish stage for the final session. Now it's not going to be the official polish in the sense that I've still got a lot of work to do on this, so it's not going to be final. But I can at least teach you some of the features that I would use when I go into polish. That's going to help it make it feel a bit more fleshy and natural. And a lot of it is to do with copy and pasting different controls onto other bits, which has been inherited different generations of people teaching each other. It's just a workflow. But it's just by doing quick copy and pastes of different curves can actually give you some really nice results. So yeah, I'll see you guys next Wednesday, and enjoy the rest of your week. Okay, bye.